All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to talk about something that a lot of organizations know they need, but a few, just a very few, have actually implemented well: data loss prevention in Google Workspace. How many of you have a data loss policy in place right now? And I'm not talking about a written policy or an SOP sitting in a shared drive somewhere, but an actual technical control that enforce how sensitive data moves across the organization. If the answer is not really, or we've been wanting to get there, you're not alone. And this is the reason why we're having this webinar. My name is Kevin Barahona, and I lead operations here in Cloudasta. And I am with Ernesto Rivas, one of our greatest Google Workspace experts. All right, so why data loss prevention, DLP, is a must? Here's the reality. Remote and hybrid work change everything about how data flows through the organization. Back then, when everyone was in the office, behind corporate network, you had a natural perimeter. That perimeter is gone. Now you have people all over the place working from hotspots, from like personal laptops, sharing drive links from coffee shops, forwarding emails from their phones, et cetera, et cetera. And the default response from the company: training. Hey, everyone, please complete this 20-minute security awareness by Friday. Nothing wrong with that training. Training is crucial, and it creates awareness. However, training alone is not a security measure. Training is not going to stop someone from accidentally attaching last quarter's financial report to the wrong email chain. So that's why we're saying human error is the number one threat, and we have to have additional controls on top of your best practices in the office. All right, so let me give you a few scenarios that happen more often than anyone wants to share, anyone wants to admit. The first one, the wrong attachment. So someone is prepping your sales team. Let's say your sales team is prepping a pitch, it's prepping the proposal for the client, and they grab what they think is the generic pricing template, but they accidentally attached the internal margin analysis. So what happens? The email goes out, and now your client knows exactly your internal numbers. Terrible situation, right? The other example is oversharing drive links. So someone creates a Google Doc with employee compensation plan data for internal analysis, and they set sharing to anyone with the link, or choose to share with anyone in the company because they want to make it easy for HR to access. Except now that link can be forwarded to anyone, and it will be. So it's a very concerning situation. The next one, external sharing with no guardrails. Let's say another team member shares the entire Drive folder and client project folder with the client, and that folder also happens to have very sensitive internal nodes and even customer PII that the vendor was never supposed to see. So now you see some data leaking outside because of those missing granular controls. And then let's say the other scenario where the environment or the suite of collaboration is way too restricted. So employees are trying to find a way around to get access and end up installing third-party tools. And this gives you shadow IT, right? Now you have more systems that you're not on top of it. And all of this, you see, all of these have one thing in common. None of these are malicious. None of these are cyber attacks. Every single one of them is a policy violation for sure that could trigger compliance or legal needs. So that's why DLP comes in very handy, not as a replacement for training, for security training, but as an actual tool, as an actual enforcement layer that catches all of these human misses, right? All right, so let's talk about what DLP actually is and how Google Workspace implements it. So 3 steps: detect, classify, and protect. At its core, DLP is a set of rules in Workspace that inspect content, whether emails, chats, files, and documents, and take certain actions when that content matches the patterns that we have identified as sensitive. So step 1, scanning data. Number 2, classifying, whether labeling, determining next steps. And number 3, take action, protecting data, restricting access, blocking access. So what are the DLP components in Google Workspace? In this webinar, we're going to talk about 4 key components, and that's Gmail DLP rules, drive classification and labels, context-aware access, and alerts. So the first one, Gmail DLP rules. This is where you define what happens when someone tries to share an email containing sensitive data. You can scan the body, the subject line, and even the attachments. So you can look for things like credit card numbers, social security numbers, and even medical records for HIPAA compliant purposes. Or you can define your very own criteria, your patterns, the patterns that you're trying to look out, depending on what's sensitive for you. When a match is found, you have options. You can block the message, quarantine the message for review, and you can even modify the headers or the recipient intended. Second one, drive classification and labels. This is a big one. Google Workspace lets you apply visuals, like visual labels, to your files. You want to think of this like the typical confidential, internal only, public type of label on the top of your Google Drive file. And you can apply this manually. But the good thing is you can configure rules to auto-classify based on your criteria. So if someone creates a sheet that contains very sensitive data, the system can automatically tag this as confidential, and then you can attach the policies. We'll see that in just a minute, in just a couple of minutes. The next one, context-aware access. In my opinion, this is very underrated, and context-aware access, it's all about like the connotation or the context to access certain service. So this lets you control access to applications and data based on very specific context. You want to think of this, like whether the employee is using managed or unmanaged devices, the location. Now that we're all over the place, people accessing from IP addresses, etc. So you could say, for example, users can access Drive from any device, but they can only download files labeled as confidential from a managed and encrypted device. Think about it. That's powerful. And that's how you let people work flexible without giving away keys or access to very critical data. And finally, alerts and audit logs. None of these 3 components matter if you don't have a monitoring principle, right? So it's all about monitoring. You can, in Google Workspace, you can set up alerts to let you know when a DLP rule is triggered. That is notifications to the right admins. So you can specify which admins are notified based on which alerts. All right, awesome. So let's get into the fun part. For the next step, I'm gonna switch over to the admin console, and I'm gonna walk you through a couple of settings live. And then we're gonna check them one on one. So let me all right, let me share. And just before I share, can we go to the next slide, Ernesto? We're gonna look at real quick before I share the screen. We're gonna look at the first demo. We're gonna be demoing Gmail and Google Chat. So here's a quick summary. We're going to create a rule that's the scope is a very specific organizational unit. So a very specific group or a group of people that are going to be our beta testers, let's say, or the pilot group, whatever you want to call it. The applications that we're going to affect is our Gmail and Google Chat. And the condition, we're going to create a very specific content matching condition that simulates a credit card number. The confidence, we're going to set it to high, and the minimum, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. I'm just going over the requirements for this DLP rule. And now that we have this, let's go to my screen. Awesome. So steps to create your DLP rule. You have two ways. And I'll show you the easy one first. You can go to rules, and you'll see that Google makes it super easy because Google even gives you templates that you can choose from. So if I click on templates, you're gonna see very convenient and regional based templates that you can use, so you don't have to start from scratch. So let's say, for instance, I am a global company, I'm a global firm, and I need to create very specific security conditions for my people in France, let's say. And then you can use this as your baseline to start modifying the rule, right? And I'm not gonna spend time here just because I want to show you, from scratch how to create it. So going back to the example, for you to create your DLP, your Gmail DLP compliance rule, you will need to go to Applications, Google Workspace, Gmail. So here in Gmail, scroll down, and you'll see a section that says compliance. And then you have content compliance. So here in this section is where you're going to specify your DLP rule. You see, we have a couple already established. I'm going to walk you through the process of configuring. Heads up, this has propagation time. So we're going to configure the rule, and we're going to look at some that we already created just for the sake of the demo. But when you create a DLP rule, any type of DLP rule, you have to give it a max of 24 hours for full propagation. So here is where we specify what we want. So going back to what Ernesto was showing, we wanted to create a rule with the name. I'll try to copy paste so we can try to fly through it. DLP-ER, and then what messages we want to affect. We want to choose outbound because it's not only internal, it's outbound emails in general. And then we want to specify the first parameter. Which messages are we identifying, or what conditions do we want this DLP rule to scan? So here we have 4 different criteria points, and the first one being simple content match. So here we're being very specific on the content that we're looking for, and we can specify the text data that the DLP rule is scanning for. We're gonna go to predefined content match because I want to show you something. Google makes it super easy to choose from regional regulated PII information. So for instance, we can look for the credit card. You can see here that there are some common global terms that you can choose from, and even from very specific countries, like a passport. And what this is going to do, it's going to analyze based on the passport format for the given country. So once I find the credit card number, here, Google credit card number, we can say confidence threshold. We can set this to high or medium depending on the type of analysis we're performing. And for these predefined rules, we can set it to medium or high because Google has done the job for us. Now I'll go back to let's say advanced content match. So here we can get a little more custom and a little more specific on what we want to look out for. So we can specify that what we're looking for is emails, and we're going to scan headers and body of the email. We're going to tell them that, hey, it needs to contain these text, or it needs to start with or end with, or not contain that text at all. Then once we specify that, we're going to decide what's going to happen with the message. So here is where we're defining the action to happen. So we want to change the message, or we want to block it. So if we want to reject the message, then here is where we can define the custom message that we want. Like, you're not allowed to share outside the organization, contact your admin, all those type of things. For the sake of the time, because we want to show you other settings, we already have created a setting that's already propagated, but this is how you create your rule. And you see here, once created, you can see the options that you have in the console. You can enable it, you can disable it. If you're testing this, you can specify for a given unit, which in this case, we said we were going to be looking at Ernesto's OU. And you see that there is already a rule that we created. So now I'll shift to Ernesto just to see this in action. Remember, what we're blocking is, or what we're simulating is someone sharing a credit card number. And we did the exact same thing for chat. And I'll show you in just a minute how to configure for chat. So go for it.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so basically, after the rule has been configured and the propagation time has finally arrived, whenever we send a message, and we will see this applied to chats and also emails, the rules will trigger and will block the message. So first, these matches, of course, if you have text and also if you have an image. So for example, if I try to send this to Kevin, Kevin being an external employee, this is an external account from what I'm testing this from. So whenever I send this either via text, or if I send it via images, I will get this trigger. And it says that the message is not be able to be sent because it doesn't match the criteria of my organization. This was the custom message that we created. This can be any message that you want, or you can let Google decide what message shows up in here. So unless I remove the information that is being blocked, for example, if I don't put this, for example, then yes, the message can be sent without any problems. The same happens if this is an image. So if I try to send an image, uh, I don't see the warning at the moment, but whenever I go to the inbox, then I'll get a bounce back, like the ones that you get like this, that says that the message cannot be sent, and it bounces back to me. So unless I remove the image or I remove the text, then I'm able to send the messages without any issues. Here we go. So basically the bounce back just arrived. I cannot share this because it was blocked, because it found that the expression, in this case being the expression in an image, it matches what Kevin created, and I'm unable to send those type of messages. The same thing applies for the chat. So, for example, I'm chatting with Kevin, and this applies to external and internal members, of course. So if I try to send Kevin this image like this, the same rule will trigger, and it's going to tell me you cannot send this because of its content. And the same happens if it's text. So if I try to edit this and I put something like this, then there is not a problem. I can send the messages without any without any issues, and Kevin will get it. The image is still something that I'm not able to share because it's still saying that it's sensitive. So unless I remove it, then is when I have the option to finally send images or text, because it's not triggering any sort of regulations or any rules that are in place. That is for the first part of the demo. Go ahead, Kevin. You're muted.
Thank you. Can we go back just 1 minute? All right. So I want to, so we show you in Gmail how to create it. For chat specifically, if we want to create the same DLP rules, we have to go to, I'll go back here. I'll go back here, rules. So if I go to rules, I showed you the templates. But if I want to create a data protection, a DLP rule, I need to choose data protection. So I'll show you real quick. It's a similar way to how we did it in Gmail, but for Gmail, we used a different path. For chat, we can do the same thing. We can specify the name and a brief description to help us remember. And then you can choose the application for this DLP rule. And this is where we send, like messages sent, file uploaded. We can create whatever rule we want, and then we can choose the actions, which is what Ernesto was explaining. We want to warn users, hey, heads up, you're doing this, or we want to block completely, right? Or if we are in audit only, which we're going to cover at the end after the demo, our recommendations. And then this is the alerting, or the basically informing all super admins or specific administrators. So that's for Google Chat. So now let's look at the presentation real quick just to see the next demo.
On it, just loading.
Awesome. So for the next, thank you, Ernesto. So for the next one, we're going to create a auto label sensitive files. The rule that we're going to create is basically being applied, same thing, to a very specific OU. And then the application that we're triggering, or the application that we're using this for, is Google Drive. The condition is same thing, credit card number. And let's go to the admin console. All right. So same thing, we want to go to rules. We want to create a new data protection rule. And then we said we want to call this demo. And then we want drive files to scan. And then here's where we can specify. Here we see a few more options. We can block external sharing. We can just warn, or we can disable download, or we can apply classification labels, which is what we want for this demo. And then here, I'm just going to spend like 1 minute or 2 minutes just talking about the classification labels. This is super useful because you can manage. If you look at here, I can go to my label manager, which is also found in this path: security, access and data control, label manager. So if I go here, you can see I can get creative and basically create any type of labeling conditions I want to use for DLP rules. So right now I have already created one, but if I wanted to create a new label system, then you see how Google allows me to choose whatever or the two applications that I'm working one of the two applications that I'm working on, and then you can create a specific label right here. I'll go back to here because I already created my label. It's called file sensitivity. And then it's called confidential. So what happens, I need to specify, whether users are allowed to change the labels and find values or not. So for the sake of this demo, I don't want users to be able to reapply. I don't want users to be able to apply labels. The alerting, same mechanism. I think the demo said we wanted medium or high. And then we want to say, I want to send a notification to one of the admins, in this case, me. All right. And then I hit continue. And then here is where I need to specify. Let's do Ernesto real quick just to see it happening. And then here's where we have to specify what content is going to trigger. And then here we can scan title, suggested edits, encryption status, or body. And then here, Google recommends predefined data, similar to how I show you for Gmail. Google already did the job of giving you a global PII pieces of information that we want to look out for. So in this case, we're going to look for the credit card number. There you go, global credit card number, and then a likely threshold from very low to high. Depending on, we're going to get to the recommendation part in just a minute, but depending on how aggressive we want this rule and in which stage we are, we have to play with the likely threshold for more effectiveness. For now, I'm going to do a medium threshold, and then I'm going to hit continue. I am not going to create this just because there's one already. And one of the important watch points is you have to be on top of your DLP rules to make sure that they don't conflict with each other. Because sometimes if you're an admin and you're creating this specific, or you say at the root level and someone comes in and creates another one for a very specific OU, that can give you false positives. So you have to be on top of your DLP rules all the time. So like I said, here we have a summary of the rule that I just created. I'm not going to create it, like I said, just because I'm going to get out of here. There is already right here, there's already a rule that's been created for this purpose. Right, awesome. So let's see it live. Ernesto, you want to
Sure.
go back to sharing? Oh, you're sharing.
Yeah. So now this is pretty interesting because this applies to all of the type of documents in Drive. So for example, at the moment, you don't see any labels applied to this Google Sheet, for example. But if I copy and paste, I will use the same message that we were dealing with the email. At the moment I apply this, you see that the label automatically applies here. The same happens if it's a presentation. It doesn't matter if it's a presentation. Again, the confidential label just kicks in, and whenever we have sensitive content, in this case we have defined this text as our sensitive and confidential data, this is when we have this trigger automatically, and we don't have to do basically anything. Just create a file, and whenever we are putting sensitive data here, any type of information that you don't want to share, this is when we automatically have this a confidential rule and label applied to all of our files, basically. That will be for this specific scenario. Going back to Kevin, because we still have another part of the demo.
Awesome. So Ernesto, can we? Thank you. Okay, so that's basically what Ernesto showed you. We have already created number two demo. We created we restricted sharing in demo 2. So now if Ernesto, can you try sharing outside just to see
Oh,
what
yeah.
happens?
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me just present it again. I already have a file where I tried to share this file with Kevin. So this was just for you to see that the labels were automatically applied. But this file, for example, even if it was an image or a text, whenever we try to share this content with somebody else, for visibility, you will still see the name of the person here, but there's going to be a red banner, or in this case, a red text that says that your domain does not allow to have this person accessing the file, because we have a rule in place. So this allows us to be safe that even though we have this type of data inside of our organization, we can make sure that there's not going to be an employee that is going to share this by mistake. It's going to kick in, and also the admins will get the notifications. And as Kevin suggested, this could be done in two ways. I mean, maybe we don't want to block this. We just want the users to get a notification saying, okay, look, you can share this, and we're going to share this with your admin for audit purposes. Or we can be fully restricted and have rules like this to completely remove the ability to share information that contains sensitive data to outsiders or even to inside members of the organization, basically.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's go back. We still have a couple minutes. Let's go back real quick and let's look at the recommendations, best practices, and what we typically see from a client support standpoint and how to make it better whenever you're thinking of implementing DLP. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. All right. So common mistakes whenever you're testing this out, whenever you want to implement DLP, you don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to overblock people. You don't want to overwhelm people with this new security measure. So blocking too aggressively without a review phase, a monitoring phase, is gonna lead to business breaking the business, right? Disrupting day to day. People are gonna get frustrated. They are gonna see DLP as a negative thing. So we don't want that. Skipping monitoring, we see, like straight to action. Like I want to implement DLP and I want this to block X, Y, and Z without realization, without awareness on how does my business work? Like, are we sharing a lot of information outside? Are we not sharing a lot of information? That's why the observation phase, which we're going to see in a minute, is critical. No ownership DLP policies without a clear owner. Remember, I said at the beginning that none of the DLP stuff matters if we don't have an active monitoring principle, right? So we want to make sure we have a clear owner of the DLP implementation, rule monitoring, and we have to have a review cadence. Like the business changes. We want to set up some time to, hey, do we need to adjust rules? Do we need to implement new rules? And defining this type of accountability is going to make sure that you have a very clean and smooth DLP implementation. Let's go to the next slide, please. So that's why we suggest a 3-phase DLP rollout framework. So Cloudasta suggests an observation phase. That's your phase 1. We want to turn DLP on. We want to create these rules in audit only mode. We don't want them to perform any action. We just want to understand how is the data flowing in my organization. I want to scan the emails, messages, files, whatever matters to me, but I want to understand the data that is being sent out, right? Shared internally, externally. We want to configure the alerts. We want to make sure we send notification to my beta testers, the people that are behind this pilot. For phase 2, and then that's the first 4 weeks. For the next 4 weeks, we want to have a more control, more hands-on control. We want to let users know that this is happening. We want Ernesto and Kevin to know that, hey, you're not supposed to be sharing, like HIPAA compliant. We're in the HIPAA industry, so you should not be disclosing this. Heads up. We want to test context-aware policies, right? Remember how I told you the context-aware and DLP combination to make sure people feels, like I'm able to collaborate. I'm very flexible on sharing this and that. But when it gets to downloading, getting out of the cloud, there's a clear stop, right? Review and tune false positives, right? We want to make sure that all of this observation, all of this watching from the past 4 weeks, we want to fine tune what's not working. And that's why when I was configuring the rule, remember I told you the likelihood, the severity, all of those things. Here is where you refine and say how aggressive I want this to be. And then for the final period, for the final 4 weeks, we have an enforcement phase. Here is where blocking or the highest severity of the DLP rule happens. Like here, people are already familiar with this DLP. They have some familiarity with how the data is being shared, not just from training, not just from HR reminders, but also from day-to-day reminders for the past 4 weeks. So here is where the hard and forced sharing rules happens, right? So here's where we switch from view audit only, to you're gonna block, you're gonna restrict access, and ongoing monitoring still happens, right? We want to make sure we get feedback from the users. We want to override their workflows. So bottom line, it's a 3-step process. Watch or observation, control, and enforce, right? Now, one more thing before we wrap it up. DLP is not a standalone initiative. It works best when it's part of a broader data governance strategy. That's why we've been talking about backup, Google Vault. When it connects to your classification standards, your policies, your internal policies, your response plan, that's when it becomes, successful or effective. This is just and that's why we've been talking about compliance unlocked. This is part 3 of this series, and it's another part of Google Workspace that you can leverage for your business continuity and security. All right. Thank you again for the time. Ernesto, thank you as always. Stay tuned for upcoming webinars. Your trusted partner advisor, Cloudasta. Have a great day.